What the hell is that smell?
He shoved back from the table, napkin over his nose, glaring at the black woman in the white dress.
Bleach and poverty. Who are you?
Audrey, sir. I'm a nurse.
A nurse. From some sewage drain they call a clinic?
He waved at her dress.
A hospital rag. Did you dig it out of a trash bag?
No, sir.
Shut your mouth!
He shoved her plate off the table. It shattered on marble.
Filthy hands on my silverware. Get out!
She flinched, stepped back. Her fingers found the burn scar on her forearm. Behind him, his bodyguard saw it and went still. He knew that scar. What he didn't know was how to tell his boss the truth without destroying him. Audrey Underwood woke up the same way she had for the past 6 years, to the sound of a leaking faucet and a daughter who talked in her sleep. 5:14 in the morning. The alarm hadn't gone off yet. It never needed to. Her body knew the rhythm. Roll left, feet on cold linoleum. Avoid the floorboard that creaked near the bathroom door. She moved through the dark like a woman who had memorized every crack in her own life. The apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned twice. The hallway smelled like mildew and someone else's cooking. The elevator hadn't worked since March. But the rent was $480 a month, and in South End, that was a miracle. She brushed her teeth with the faucet barely open. The pipes groaned if you turned them too far. She pulled on her scrubs, the same 3 sets she rotated every week, washed by hand on Sundays because the laundromat charged $2.75 a load, and that was bread money. Lily was still asleep. 10 years old, long braids fanned across a pillow that was losing its stuffing. Audrey pulled the blanket up to her chin, pressed her lips to the girl's forehead, and whispered what she whispered every morning. "We're gonna be okay." She didn't always believe it, but she always said it. The walk to Mercy Hill Clinic took 22 minutes if she cut through the park. She passed the same corners. Mr. Coleman sweeping his barbershop steps before dawn. The bodega with the crooked awning. The mural of a woman holding a child that someone had painted on the side of a laundromat 10 years ago and nobody ever painted over. South End wasn't pretty, but it was hers. Mercy Hill sat between a shuttered hardware store and a church that held services in Spanish on Sundays. The sign out front had a cracked letter. It read, "Mary Hill Clinic now," and nobody had the budget to fix it. Inside, the walls were clean but bare. The chairs in the waiting room didn't match. The blood pressure machine was held together with tape and faith. But Audrey loved it. She loved the way Mrs. Patterson brought tamales every Thursday, even though she couldn't pay her bill. She loved the way the Rodriguez kids drew pictures on the back of intake forms. She loved the way Dr. Hayes, 63, bad knee, could have retired a decade ago, still showed up at 7 sharp every single morning because he said these people deserved a doctor who looked them in the eye. That morning, Dr. Hayes didn't look anyone in the eye. He called Audrey into his office, closed the door, sat behind his desk with his hands folded the way people fold them when they're about to say something that hurts. "We've got 3 months, Audrey." 3 months until what? Until the funding runs out. The county cut our grant. The state's redirecting to 2 larger clinics uptown. He pulled off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "We serve 1,100 patients a quarter. They know that. They just don't care." Audrey didn't sit down. She stood with her arms crossed, fingers resting on the burn scar the way she always did when something hit too hard. The scar was a map of raised tissue that ran from her right wrist to just past her elbow. She never covered it, never explained it unless someone asked, and almost nobody asked. "So what do we do?" Dr. Hayes opened a drawer, pulled out 2 thick envelopes, ivory, gold trim. The kind of paper that cost more than Audrey's grocery bill. These came last week. The Sterling Gala, hosted by the Holloway Foundation at the Grandview Hotel downtown. Black tie charity event for community health programs. He slid one across the desk. They invited every small clinic in the district. I think they're looking for tax write-off stories, honestly. But if we show up, shake the right hands, maybe we get on someone's radar. Audrey picked up the envelope. It smelled like cologne and old money. Black tie, she said. I know.
I don't own anything black tie.
You don't have to. You just have to show up and be you. That's more than most people in that room can say. That night, Audrey stood in front of her closet, which was really just a metal rack behind a curtain, and pushed through the hangers. Scrubs, more scrubs, a hoodie, a church blouse, and in the back, wrapped in a plastic garment bag that had yellowed at the edges, a white dress. Simple. Cotton. A-line cut that fell just below the knee. Her mother had sewn it, by hand, on a Singer machine that sounded like a small motorboat, the year before she passed. The hem was slightly uneven. One seam near the waist had been restitched twice. There was a faint discoloration near the left shoulder, where Audrey had tried to bleach out a stain years ago, and almost ruined the whole thing. But when she held it up to the light, it still looked like what it was. A dress made by someone who loved her. She pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes. "Mama," she said to no one, "I hope this is enough." She didn't know yet. She couldn't. That one white dress was about to walk into a room full of black suits. And nothing would ever be the same. The Grandview Hotel sat on the corner of 5th and Monroe, like a cathedral made of glass and money. Audrey had driven past it 100 times, on her way to the pharmacy, the grocery store, the clinic. She had never been inside. She had never had a reason to be. Tonight was different. She parked 3 blocks away because the valet line was filled with cars that cost more than her apartment building. A black Escalade, a silver Bentley, a pearl white Porsche with a license plate that read, "Earn It." She locked her 15-year-old Honda Civic and checked the mirror one more time. The white dress fit the way it always had. Snug at the waist, loose at the shoulders, hemline brushing just below the knee. She had ironed it twice, steamed the collar with a kettle because she didn't own a steamer. Her shoes were borrowed, black flats from her neighbor Rosa, half a size too big, stuffed with tissue at the toes. She looked fine, not glamorous, not striking. Fine. And for tonight, fine would have to be enough. Dr. Hayes was waiting at the entrance, in a suit he hadn't worn since his daughter's wedding. The lapels were slightly too wide for the decade. His tie had a small coffee stain near the knot that he'd tried to cover with a pin. "You look nice," he said. "You're a terrible liar," Audrey said. But she smiled. They walked in together. The lobby hit her like a wall of light. Crystal chandeliers, not one, not two, but a cascade of them running the length of the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The floor was marble so polished she could see her own reflection staring back up at her. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne in glasses taller than Lily's juice cups. The air smelled like orchids and leather and something she couldn't name. The particular scent of places that didn't want people like her. She felt it immediately. The looks. Not hostile, worse. Dismissive. Eyes that landed on her dress, calculated its value in under a second, and moved on. A woman in an emerald gown glanced at Audrey's borrowed flats and turned back to her conversation without breaking her sentence. A man with a pocket square that probably cost more than Audrey's weekly paycheck stepped slightly to the left as she passed, as if proximity itself was a risk. Audrey's hand drifted to her right forearm. The scar. She pressed her thumb into the thickest ridge, the one just above the wrist where the skin had melted and reformed into something that looked like a river delta on a map. It was her reset button, her way of reminding herself that she had walked through worse than a room full of strangers who didn't want her there. She had walked through fire. "Table 9, Dr. Hayes said, reading the card a hostess had handed him. "That's us." Table 9 was center stage. Round, 10 seats, white lilies in a crystal vase, 3 forks per setting. Audrey had never seen 3 forks at a single place setting in her life. She picked up the smallest one and put it back down like it might break. 4 people were already seated. A woman in red silk who didn't look up. A couple in matching navy who nodded politely but said nothing. And at the head of the table, even though it was a round table, you could tell there was a head. A man in a black suit. Perfect black suit. Not a wrinkle. Not a thread out of place. Silver cufflinks that caught the chandelier light like tiny mirrors. A watch on his left wrist that was thick and gold and deliberate. The kind of watch that didn't tell time so much as announce it. His hair was steel gray, swept back with the kind of precision that came from a barber who charged by the minute. His jaw was square. His posture was authority itself. Garrett Holloway. Audrey didn't know his name yet. She would. She sat down, smoothed her white dress over her knees, placed her hands in her lap, smiled at no one in particular, and waited for the evening to begin. She didn't notice the man standing 6 feet behind Garrett's chair. Black suit, earpiece, hands clasped at his waist. A bodyguard, tall, broad-shouldered, face like carved stone. Cole Bennett. He didn't smile. He didn't talk. He watched. And right now, he was watching Audrey. Not her face, not her dress. Her right forearm, where the sleeve of the white dress ended and the scar began. His eyes locked on it the way a soldier's eyes lock on a tripwire. His pulse ticked up, his fingers uncurled. 8 years, a highway, a fire. He blinked hard and looked again. But what he didn't know yet, what no one in that room knew, was that the man Audrey had pulled from the flames that night shared a last name with the man who was about to ruin her evening. The first course arrived on plates so white they looked surgical. Pan-seared scallops on a bed of microgreens with a drizzle of something gold. Audrey didn't touch hers. Not because she wasn't hungry, she hadn't eaten since the granola bar she'd split with Lily that morning, but because she wasn't sure which fork to use, and she wasn't about to guess wrong in front of these people. Dr. Hayes leaned over. "The small one," he whispered. She picked it up. Her fingers were steady. That was when Garrett Holloway looked at her for the first time. Really looked. His eyes started at the top of her head, moved down to her white dress, paused at her shoes, and came back up with the kind of expression a man gives a stain on his favorite couch. "I don't think we've met." His voice was smooth, polished, the way a blade is polished. "And I make a point of knowing everyone at my table." "Audrey Underwood. I'm a nurse at Mercy Hill Clinic in South End. Dr. Hayes and I were invited." "A nurse?" He said it the way someone says cockroach. He turned to his wife. "Vivian, did you hear that? A nurse. From South End." Vivian Holloway. Blonde, thin, pearls tight against her collarbone, smiled the kind of smile that isn't a smile. "How charming." "Charming." Garrett repeated the word like he was tasting something sour. "Tell me, Audrey, what exactly does a community nurse contribute to a $5,000 a plate dinner?" "We serve over 1,100 patients a quarter. Many of them don't have insurance, so I didn't ask for a brochure. He waved his hand. The table went quiet. I asked what you contribute, because from where I'm sitting, the answer is nothing. You contribute nothing. You're here to take. That's what people like you do, isn't it? Show up where you're not wanted, sit where you don't belong, eat food you can't afford, and hope someone feels sorry enough to write a check. Nobody spoke. The woman in red silk studied her wine glass. The couple in navy looked at their plates. Dr. Hayes opened his mouth. Audrey put her hand on his arm. A small pressure. Enough. "We're here for the clinic," she said quietly. "The clinic." Garrett laughed, a single hard bark. "I've driven through South End. I've seen your clinic. That sad little building with the broken sign. You know what I thought when I saw it? I thought, that's exactly what happens when you hand things to people who don't know how to build." A woman at the next table turned to watch. Then another. Garrett didn't lower his voice. He raised it. "You want to know the truth? People like you don't belong in rooms like this. You don't understand how any of this works. You think kindness built this hotel? You think charity runs this city? Money runs this city. Power. And you have neither." He straightened his cufflinks. "So finish your little scallop and go back to wherever you came from." Audrey sat still. Her breath was even. Her eyes were dry. But under the table, her right hand was pressed flat against her thigh, and her thumb was digging into the scar on her forearm so hard the skin around it went white. Vivian leaned across the table. "Garrett, darling, you're being too harsh." She paused, smiled. "She probably doesn't even understand half of what you're saying." The table laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Garrett reached for his wine, a deep red Bordeaux that probably cost more than Audrey's rent. He gestured with the glass as he spoke, his wrist loose, his attention already drifting, as if Audrey had become furniture. Honestly, the smell alone. His hand swept wide. The glass tilted. Red wine arced through the air in a slow, deliberate curve and landed squarely on Audrey's white dress. The room gasped, then went silent. The stain spread fast, dark red blooming across the cotton like a wound opening. It soaked through to her skin. She felt it, warm, then cold, then permanent. Garrett looked down at the damage. He didn't apologize. He smirked. Well, that dress needed some color anyway. Vivian covered her mouth, not in shock, to hide the laugh. Audrey stood up slowly. The chair didn't scrape. She didn't stumble. She rose the way a woman rises when she has decided that the next thing she does will define who she is. She looked down at the stain. Red wine on white cotton. Her mother's dress. The only thing she had left of a woman who had sewn every stitch with arthritic fingers and a love that asked for nothing. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She picked up her napkin, pressed it once against the stain, gently, the way you press a bandage, and set it back on the table. "Thank you for the evening," she said. Her voice didn't crack. "I hope it was worth it." She turned and walked toward the door. Every eye in the room followed the white dress with the red stain moving through the golden light. Nobody followed her. Nobody except one pair of eyes. Cole Bennett hadn't moved from his position behind Garrett's chair. But his breathing had changed. His fists were clenched at his sides, and his gaze was locked on the thing no one else had seen. The burn scar on Audrey's right forearm, exposed now as she held the napkin, the sleeve pulled back, the ridged skin catching the chandelier light like a roadmap to a night he had never forgotten. Highway 31. A car wrapped around a guardrail, flames eating through the dashboard. A young woman in scrubs sprinting past him toward the fire, while everyone else ran away from it. He had watched her pull a boy out of that wreckage. He had watched the fire climb her arm. He had heard her scream, once, short, swallowed, and keep pulling. He never got her name, but he never forgot the scar. And now, 8 years later, he was watching the woman who had saved his boss's son walk out of a room in a ruined dress, while his boss laughed behind her. Cole's jaw locked. His earpiece buzzed. He didn't answer it. Something was about to change. The hallway outside the ballroom was long and empty, and smelled like fresh lilies and floor polish. Audrey's flats, Rosa's flats, made soft sounds on the marble. The only other noise was the muffled laughter still leaking through the closed doors behind her. She didn't run. She didn't lean against the wall. She walked to the end of the corridor, found a bench near a window, and sat down with her hands folded over the stain on her dress. Red wine on white cotton. It had already set. She knew that. She was a nurse. She knew what was stained and what didn't. Blood, iodine, Bordeaux. Some things don't come out no matter how fast you move. She pressed her palm flat against it. The fabric was still damp, still cold. Her mother had spent 3 weekends on this dress. Audrey remembered sitting on the kitchen floor, 5 years old, watching the Singer machine rattle across the table while her mother guided the white cotton through the needle with fingers that bent at the joints the wrong way. Arthritis. She never complained about it. She just sewed slower. A dress should make you feel like yourself, her mother had said, not like someone else. Audrey closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She pressed harder into the fabric and breathed through her nose until the shaking stopped. Dr. Hayes came through the doors 2 minutes later. His face was red. His hands were balled at his sides. "I told him off," he said. "I told that man exactly who you are and what you've done for this community, and—" "Did it help?" He stopped, looked at her. "No." "Then it's okay." She stood up, smoothed the dress, stain and all. "We came for the clinic. We didn't get what we needed. That's all this is." "That is not all this is, Audrey." "I know." Her voice softened. "But if I let it be more than that right now, I won't make it to the car." They started walking toward the exit. Halfway down the corridor, an elderly man in a waiter's uniform was crouched near a service cart, picking up broken glass from a dropped champagne tray. His hands were shaking. Small cuts on 2 fingers, blood smearing the stems. Audrey stopped. "Here," she said. She crouched beside him, took his hand, and turned it over gently. "Don't pick up the stems bare-handed. You'll cut the tendons." She pulled a small pack of tissues from her purse, the same tissues stuffed in the toes of her borrowed shoes, and wrapped his fingers. Quick, clean, practiced. "Hold pressure here. Do you have a first aid kit in the kitchen?" The old man looked at her, at the stain on her dress, at the kindness in her hands. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me." She helped him to his feet. "Just keep those cuts clean. Change the wrap in an hour." Dr. Hayes watched from 3 steps away. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He had seen Audrey do this 1,000 times. In the clinic, on the bus, at the grocery store. She didn't turn it off. She couldn't. Helping people wasn't something she did. It was something she was. They reached the parking garage. Audrey leaned against the hood of her Civic. The night air hit the damp stain on her dress, and she shivered once. "Go home," she said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." "I will be. Lily's waiting." She got in the car, turned the key twice before the engine caught, pulled out of the garage and drove 3 blocks before she let the first tear fall. Just one. She wiped it with the back of her hand. The same hand that still carried the scar from a night 8 years ago when she'd pulled a stranger from a fire and never asked his name. She had never looked for him, never filed a report, never told the story at parties or put it on a resume. The scar was enough. It reminded her every morning that she was the kind of person who ran toward the fire. She just didn't know that tonight, the fire was about to run toward her. Cole Bennett had been a firefighter before he was a bodyguard. Engine Company 9, Station 14, the roughest district in the county. 6 years on the truck, 2 commendations, 1 night that never left him. Highway 31, November, just past midnight. He had been first on scene, a silver sedan wrapped around a guardrail like tinfoil around a fist. The engine block was already burning, fuel pooling under the chassis. The kind of fire that gives you 90 seconds before it gives you nothing. He was reaching for his gear when a car skidded to a stop behind him. A woman jumped out. Young, black, wearing scrubs. No gloves, no helmet, no hesitation. She ran past him. He shouted. She didn't stop. She reached through the shattered driver's window and grabbed the boy inside. Unconscious, bleeding from the temple, seatbelt melted into his shirt. She pulled. The fire climbed the dashboard. She pulled harder. The flames caught her right arm, wrist to elbow, and she screamed. Once, short, swallowed. And she kept pulling. Cole got there 3 seconds later. He dragged them both out. He smothered her arm with his jacket. He called the ambulance. He held the boy's head still while the woman, shaking, skin blistering, teeth clenched, checked the boy's pulse with her burned hand. "He's alive," she said. "Get him on board. Stabilize the neck." The ambulance took them in separate directions. Cole rode with the boy. By the time he came back to the scene, the woman was gone. No name, no ID, no trace. Just a melted patch of scrubs on the asphalt and a burned vein of rubber from her shoes. 3 days later, Cole learned the boy's name. Ethan Holloway, son of Garrett Holloway, real estate billionaire, Holloway Group, net worth north of $2 billion. Ethan survived with a concussion and second-degree burns on his chest. He remembered nothing from the crash. Not the fire, not the woman, not the hands that pulled him free. Garrett sent flowers to the hospital. He sent a check to the fire station. He never asked who saved his son. Cole had tried to tell him once, early in his employment. Garrett waved it off. "Some nurse," he said. "Doesn't matter. He's alive." It mattered now. Cole stood in the hallway of the Grandview Hotel. The ballroom doors were closed. Audrey was gone. But her voice was still in his ears, the same calm, the same steadiness he'd heard on that highway. He pulled out his phone, opened a search, typed 2 words, Highway 31. And then he made a decision that would cost him everything, or return something that should never have been lost. Cole didn't go back to the ballroom right away. He stood in the hallway for 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a long time when your hands are shaking and your career is on the line. He had worked for Garrett Holloway for 6 years. Good pay, clean work. Stand behind the man, watch the room, keep threats away. He had never questioned an order. He had never raised his voice. He had never once put his own judgment above his employer's. But he had also never watched his employer pour wine on the woman who had saved his son's life. He pulled up the old news article on his phone. The photo was grainy, a fire truck, a guardrail, a smear of smoke against a dark sky. The caption read, "Unidentified woman rescues crash victim on Highway 31. No name, no follow-up. The story had run once in a local paper and disappeared. Nobody cared about a nameless nurse who ran into a fire and walked away with a scar. Nobody except the man who watched her do it. Cole put the phone in his pocket. He straightened his jacket. He rolled his shoulders once, the way he used to before walking into a burning building. Then he walked back into the ballroom. The room had moved on. Dessert was being served, some kind of chocolate tower with gold leaf on top that nobody actually ate. Garrett was laughing with a man in a gray suit about a development deal in Midtown. Vivian was showing photos on her phone to the woman in red silk. The couple in the Navy had left. The seat where Audrey had been sitting was empty. Her napkin, stained with wine she hadn't spilled, was still folded neatly on the table, like evidence nobody had collected. Cole walked past the perimeter, past the other security, past the waiters carrying trays of coffee in cups too small to hold anything useful. He stopped 3 feet from Garrett's right shoulder. "Mr. Holloway." Garrett didn't turn. "Not now, Cole." "Mr. Holloway, I need to speak with you." "I said not now." Garrett lifted his champagne flute to the man in gray. "Where were we?" "The zoning variance on the—" "It's about your son." The flute stopped. Garrett's hand froze midair. The word son did what nothing else could. It cut through the noise, through the arrogance, through the armor. Every parent has a frequency that overrides everything. For Garrett Holloway, it was that word. He turned. "What about Ethan?" Cole didn't blink. "Highway 31, 8 years ago, the crash." "What about it?" "You never asked who pulled him out of that car." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Some first responder, a paramedic. What does this have to—" "It wasn't a paramedic." Cole's voice was steady, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear, quiet enough to sound like a verdict being read. "It was a nurse. A woman driving home from a 12-hour night shift who saw the fire and stopped her car in the middle of the highway. She ran into the wreckage while everyone else ran the other way. She pulled Ethan through a burning window with her bare hands. The fire caught her arm, burned her from the wrist to the elbow. She never gave her name. She never filed a report. She never came back for a thank you. She just disappeared." The table had gone silent. The man in gray put down his fork. Vivian's phone screen went dark in her hand. "Why are you telling me this now?" Garrett's voice was different, lower, something behind it cracking like ice under weight. "Because she was here tonight." Cole pointed to the empty chair, to the stained napkin. "She was sitting right there, in a white dress her mother made her. And you poured wine on her and told her she didn't belong." The room contracted. Conversations at adjacent tables stopped, one by one, like candles being blown out. A waiter froze mid-step. Somewhere near the back, a phone camera tilted upward and a small red light blinked on. "That's not—" Garrett started. The scar on her right forearm, wrist to elbow, burn tissue, ridged, discolored. Cole's voice didn't waver. "I was first on scene that night, Mr. Holloway. I watched her pull your son out of that fire with her bare hands. I watched her arm burn while she refused to let go. I tried to find her after, for years, and never could." His voice cracked for the first time. "And tonight I watched you humiliate her in front of 100 people for the crime of being poor and black and sitting at your table. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Garrett's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. His hand was still holding the champagne flute, but the stem was trembling now, the liquid inside shivering in tiny concentric circles that widened and collapsed and widened again. "Call Ethan," Cole said. "Ask him about Highway 31. Ask him about the scar on his chest. Ask him why he's alive." Garrett pulled out his phone. His fingers missed the screen twice before he found the contact. The phone rang once. Twice. "Dad?" "Ethan, the accident. Highway 31. Do you remember?" "I don't remember the crash, Dad. You know that. I was unconscious." "But someone pulled you out. A woman. A nurse. Do you—" "I know someone saved me. The doctors told me afterward. I had burns on my chest from the dashboard. Whoever pulled me out got burned too, worse than me. They said she—" Ethan paused. "Dad, why are you asking me this now?" Garrett couldn't answer. He was staring at the empty chair, at the wine stain still wet on the white napkin, at the space where Audrey Underwood had been sitting 20 minutes ago. The woman who had pulled his only son from a burning car with her bare hands and never told a single living soul. The woman he had called worthless. The woman whose dress he had ruined. The woman he had told to leave. He set the champagne down. The glass clicked against the table like a period at the end of a very long sentence that should never have been written. The ballroom was dead silent. 100 people dressed in silk and diamonds, and not one of them could produce a single sound. And somewhere outside, in a parking garage 3 blocks away, a woman in a ruined white dress was driving home to her daughter with a scar on her arm, and no idea that the truth had just detonated in the room she'd left behind. Garrett Holloway did not sleep that night. He sat in the back seat of his car for 40 minutes after the gala ended. His driver asked twice if he wanted to go home. He didn't answer. He sat with his phone in his hand, staring at the call log. The conversation with Ethan, 3 minutes and 22 seconds. The shortest and longest call of his life. When he finally walked into his house, a 6-bedroom estate in Ridgemont with a fountain in the driveway and a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes, he went straight to his study. He didn't turn on the lights. He sat in the dark with a glass of water he never drank and replayed every word he had said at that table. "You smell like a waiting room. People like you don't belong in rooms like this." That dress needed some color anyway. Each sentence hit different now. Each one landed like a hammer on glass. Vivian came in at midnight. She stood in the doorway in her silk robe, arms crossed. "Garrett, come to bed." I poured wine on her dress. "It was an accident." "No, it wasn't." He looked at his wife, and we both know it. She didn't answer. She turned around and closed the door behind her. At 7 the next morning, Garrett called Cole. The phone rang 4 times. "Mr. Holloway." "I need her name, her address, where she works." "Mercy Hill Clinic, South End." A pause. "But she won't want to see you." "I know." Ethan got there first. He drove to South End before noon. A 28-year-old in a gray hoodie and jeans, no driver, no entourage. He parked on the street outside Mercy Hill and sat in his car for 10 minutes before he could make himself walk in. The waiting room was full. A mother with 2 kids, an elderly man with a cane, a teenager holding an ice pack to his wrist. The chairs didn't match. The magazines were 3 years old. A hand-drawn sign on the wall read, "You matter here." Ethan walked to the front desk. "I'm looking for Audrey Underwood." The receptionist looked him up and down. "Are you a patient?" "No, I'm—" He stopped. What was he? A stranger. A debt. A ghost from a highway 8 years ago. I just need to speak with her, please. Audrey came out in her scrubs, stethoscope around her neck, hair pulled back. No white dress, no borrowed shoes, just the woman she was every other day of her life. Ethan saw the scar first, the burn tissue running from her wrist past her elbow, rough, ridged, permanent. He stared at it the way you stare at something holy. "You're the one," he said. His voice broke on the second word. "Highway 31. You pulled me out." Audrey's hand went to the scar, automatic, protective. "How did you find me?" "My father's bodyguard. He was there that night. He saw you at the dinner and—" Ethan's eyes filled. He pressed his fist to his mouth and breathed hard through his nose. "I'm sorry. I've spent 8 years not knowing who saved my life. And now I'm standing here looking at the scar you got doing it." Audrey didn't move. Then she stepped forward and put her arms around him. Not like a hero, like a nurse, like a mother, like a woman who had spent her whole life holding people together. "You were so young," she whispered. "I didn't know if you'd make it." "I made it because of you." They stood in the waiting room of a clinic that was 3 months from closing, surrounded by patients who had no idea what they were witnessing. The teenager with the ice pack looked up from his phone. The elderly man with the cane wiped his eye with the back of his hand. Garrett arrived 2 days later. No driver this time. He drove himself, something he hadn't done in years. He parked in front of Mercy Hill and stared at the broken sign. Mercy Hill Clinic. He sat there long enough for a parking ticket to appear on his windshield. He walked in wearing the same black suit, but the posture was different. The shoulders were lower, the jaw was softer. The eyes were looking at things they had spent years refusing to see. Audrey met him in the hallway. She didn't invite him into an exam room. She didn't offer him a seat. She stood with her arms at her sides and waited. "I came to apologize," he said. "Okay." "I was cruel. I was wrong. You were exactly who you are, Mr. Holloway." Her voice was calm, not angry, not bitter, just clear. "I don't need your apology. I need you to understand something. The woman you humiliated at that dinner and the woman who pulled your son from that car, we're not 2 different people. I didn't change between that highway and your table. Your eyes changed." Garrett stood still. His mouth opened and closed. He looked at the waiting room, the mismatched chairs, the hand-drawn sign, the mother holding her daughter's hand. "What can I do?" "You can't undo what you said. But this clinic serves 1,100 people a quarter. We have 3 months of funding left. If you want to do something for them, not for me." He nodded, slowly, like a man learning a language he should have spoken all along. "I'd like to fund the clinic, fully. Expansion, equipment, staff, whatever Dr. Hayes needs. With one condition," Audrey said. "It keeps its name. Mercy Hill, not Holloway." He almost smiled. Almost. "Mercy Hill," he repeated. She extended her hand. He took it, carefully, the way you hold something you've already broken once and don't intend to break again. And when their hands met, his fingers brushed the edge of her scar. He flinched. She didn't. She had stopped flinching at that scar a long time ago. The video hit the internet at 11:47 that night. Someone at table 12 had recorded the entire exchange. Cole standing behind Garrett's chair, the revelation, the phone call to Ethan, the silence that followed. The footage was shaky, shot from a low angle under the table's edge. But the audio was crystal clear. Every word, every pause, every second of Garrett Holloway's face collapsing in on itself like a building losing its foundation. By morning, it had 600,000 views. By noon, 2.3 million. By the end of the week, it had crossed 14 million, and the hashtag was everywhere. The comments came in waves, thousands of them, tens of thousands. People who had been humiliated at jobs they couldn't afford to quit. People who had been told they didn't belong in rooms they had earned. People who had done kind things for strangers and never received a word of thanks. They saw themselves in Audrey Underwood, in her white dress, in her silence, in the way she stood up and walked out without breaking. News outlets picked it up within 48 hours. Local first, then national. The headline that stuck was the one a reporter in Chicago wrote at 2 a.m. Billionaire humiliates the woman who saved his son. Doesn't know until it's too late. Garrett Holloway's name became a verb. Don't Holloway someone trended for 3 days. Holloway Group stock dipped 9%. 2 corporate partners issued public statements distancing themselves. A real estate deal in Denver fell through when the other side cited reputational concerns. But Garrett didn't hide. He didn't send lawyers. He didn't issue a press release written by a crisis management team. He went on television. He sat across from a morning show host in the same black suit. He hadn't bought a new one, hadn't changed his look, as if punishing himself by wearing the uniform of the man he'd been that night. And he said what nobody expected a billionaire to say. I was wrong. Not just at the dinner. I've been wrong for a long time. I looked at a woman and saw everything I'd been taught to see. Her skin, her clothes, her zip code. I didn't see her. And the truth is, she saw my son. On the worst night of his life, she saw him. And she ran toward him while the rest of the world ran away. He paused. His eyes were wet. The host didn't interrupt. I can't undo what I said, but I can decide what I do next. He announced it that afternoon. $5 million to Mercy Hill Clinic, full expansion, new facility, modern equipment, 3 additional physicians, a night clinic for shift workers who couldn't come during the day. A separate fund, the Audrey Underwood Scholarship, for children of community health workers across the state. Full tuition, no strings. Audrey didn't watch the announcement. She was at the clinic, changing a bandage on Mr. Coleman's ankle, the barber from her block who swept his steps every morning and hadn't been able to afford a podiatrist in 3 years. She heard about it from Dr. Hayes, who walked into the exam room with his phone in one hand and tears running into his beard. 5 million, Audrey. We're not closing. She finished the bandage before she looked up. The construction started in April. The new Mercy Hill opened 6 months later. Same name, same location, twice the size. The broken sign was replaced. All the letters intact now. The waiting room chairs matched for the first time in the clinic's history. The blood pressure machine was brand new. No tape, no faith required. But Audrey kept the old stethoscope. The one with the cracked ear tips and the tubing that had yellowed from years of use. It still worked. And it reminded her of what the clinic was before anyone with money walked through the door. Ethan Holloway started volunteering on Saturdays. He didn't tell anyone his last name. He just showed up, stacked supply boxes, sorted intake forms, and sat with elderly patients who had no one else to talk to. The receptionist figured it out after 2 weeks. She didn't say anything. She just started saving him the good coffee. Lily Underwood received the first scholarship. Full ride. She told her mother she wanted to be a doctor. Audrey said nothing. She just held her daughter and pressed her face into those long braids and breathed in the smell of coconut shampoo and future. And across town, in the Holloway estate, a man in a black suit sat in his study and looked at a framed photo of his son, alive, smiling, whole, and understood for the first time what it had cost to keep that photo on his wall. The ribbon cutting was on a Saturday in October. Bright sky, cool air, the kind of morning that makes a neighborhood look like it's been holding its breath and finally let go. The new Mercy Hill Clinic stood where the old one had been. Same address, same church next door. But everything else was different. Glass doors that opened smoothly. Walls painted warm white. A waiting room with chairs that matched, and a sign out front with every letter intact. Audrey stood at the entrance. She was wearing the white dress. It had been cleaned professionally for the first time in its life. The wine stain was gone. Almost. Near the left hip, there was still a faint blush of pink where the Bordeaux had soaked deepest. She had asked the cleaner not to bleach it out completely. "Leave a little," she had said. "I want to remember." Lily stood beside her, holding oversized scissors with both hands. Dr. Hayes was behind them, new tie, no coffee stain, bad knee locked straight because he refused to sit down for this. The crowd was small but real. Mr. Coleman from the barber shop, the Rodriguez kids, Mrs. Patterson with her tamales, Rosa from next door, wearing the black flats she had lent Audrey that night, tissue still stuffed in the toes. And at the edge of the crowd, two men, Ethan Holloway, gray hoodie, hands in pockets, watching the woman who had given him his life. Garrett Holloway, black suit, 3 steps behind his son. He didn't speak. He waited until Audrey looked his way, and when she did, he nodded. Once. Small. The kind of nod that carries everything a man can't say out loud. Audrey nodded back. "You ready?" she asked Lily. "Ready." The scissors closed. The ribbon fell. The crowd clapped. Not the polished applause of a gala, but the rough, warm, uneven clapping of people who meant it. A hand touched her shoulder. Cole Bennett. Same suit, same earpiece, but his eyes were soft. In his palm was a bracelet, cheap metal, half melted, blackened on one side. Found this at the scene that night. Kept it ever since. "I think it belongs to you." Audrey took it. The metal was warm. She turned it over and read the engraving, faded, barely legible. "Be the light." Her mother had given it to her the same year she made the white dress. She closed her fingers around it and pressed it to her chest. The scar on her arm caught the October sun. It didn't shine. It didn't glow. It just was, rough and ridged and permanent, a map of the night she chose to run toward the fire. And now, finally, the fire had given something back. Audrey Underwood never asked for recognition. She never posted about the fire. She never told Lily the story of the scar. She just went to work, wrapped bandages, and treated every person who walked through her door like they mattered. Garrett Holloway had everything. Money, power, a seat at every table. But it took a woman in a white dress to show him what none of it was worth. If you were at that table, would you have stayed silent or stood up? Tell me in the comments. Share this with someone who gives everything and asks for nothing. Like, subscribe. See you in the next one. Hashtag justice for Audrey. Hashtag kindness matters.
A billionaire poured wine on a woman's dress, a dress her mother sewed by hand before she passed, told her she didn't belong. And that woman, she's the reason his son is still breathing. 8 years, Audrey carried that scar, ripped to elbow, and never told a soul. never posted about it, never looked for a thank you. She just went to work, wrapped bandage, loved her daughter. And Garrett Holloway have everything, money, power, a seat at every table. But the one thing that mattered most, his son's life, was given to him by a woman he wouldn't even let sit at his table. That's the thing about worth. You can't measure it in the cufflinks and $5,000 place. Sometimes it's a nurse in a white dress running to work, a fire every hour is running from. I know some of your own have been ordinary. You will walk into that room, felt those eyes, calculate the outfit, and look away. Being the most vulnerable person at the table that treated you like you were invisible. So tell me, if you were at the table that night, would you have stayed silent? Drop the answer below. Share this with someone who gives everything and asks for nothing. Like, subscribe, see you in the next one. And remember, some scars are the owns. They prove you didn't walk away.